Hello and welcome to our Leadership Lab conversation today, talking about a topic that I feel is so relevant for right now. So, if you're joining me for the first time for one of our Career Thrivers Leadership Labs, hello, welcome. Drop in the comments. Let me know where you are tuning in from. And if you're joining us live, right now in this moment, it is Thursday, the 28th. I had to glance. I'm like, are we really at the end of September? We are at the end of September 2023. But the great thing about joining us live on LinkedIn is that this conversation will live on the platform indefinitely over on LinkedIn as well as on YouTube. So welcome to our conversation. Listen, I'm gonna go ahead and share the obvious here. I'm glad that you're here and I'm glad that you're going to be working with me today through some sinus challenges. Okay. So we're going to work through this together. I'm going to have I got my little tissue situation set up right over here, but I'm excited about this conversation. Hey, Michelle, good to see you joining from Antioch. I see Miss Wilson joining from Detroit. So good to see you. So I just want you to just take a second as we're getting started today, and a very special shout out to our women leaders at Bridgestone. I'll tell you a little bit more about them in just a second. But if you had to describe how you're feeling right now in this moment, I just want you to put two words into the comment box. Hey, Jennifer, joining us from Akron, Ohio. Renika's joining us from Nashville. I love it. I love it. Let us know in the comment section, even if you're watching this on the replay. We'll come back around as well and check out the comments on the replay. But if you had to use just two words to describe how you're feeling right now in this moment, what would those two words be? And I'll tell you, I always enjoy starting with that check-in, right? That check-in. And we're going to talk about our emotional well-being today. So not only for conversations like this, but for our team internally at Career Thrivers, and even when we're facilitating conversations, training, workshops with our clients, it's a great way just to have a brief little, we don't talk about it. There's no judgment. You don't have to feel like you have to make it sound good. Just two words. And actually, if you didn't know, that practice is a nod from Brene Brown. So early in the pandemic, like Q2 of 2020, she shared that she does this practice with her team. And so it's just a great way, especially for those of us who are leaders. And I know that's you, whether you are a leader in title or a leader by influence. It's just a great way as leaders also for you to check in with your team. And again, whether it's a direct report team or a cross-functional team that you're leading, it's a great practice. Hey, Makia, so good to see you. I love it. So our Bridgestone ladies are on. So as you're putting your two words into the chat, we're going to talk about today a topic that is near and dear to my heart, but also a topic that I believe is very timely for not only where we are in the year, but for a lot of us, where we are in our career, right? So we're going to talk about how do you move from burnout to what I like to call brilliance. And for me, that looks like intentionally thriving in your career, right? And leveraging your strengths, your skills, all of the things that make you, your unique brilliance to bring out the best in you, but also so that you can feel your best in the work that you choose to do. So we're going to talk about how you as a woman or as an ally of women can set boundaries to thrive. So quickly, my name is Brittany Cole. If you're just joining us, or if you're new, this is your first time joining me for a leadership lab. This will be a little bit different than like our podcast. So every week we drop a new episode over on the Career Thrivers podcast. You can tune into that. I go live periodically on LinkedIn. I have a good friend on the platform, and we've been doing a challenge and sharing some insights around how do you thrive in your career and as a leader. But this leadership lab today, I'm going to share some visuals with you. So we have just a few slides, just as a nod to those of us who are visual learners, but also really the goal for this conversation is to help you walk away with one thing that will help you in your mental and emotional well-being as it relates to your career. All right. So My name is Brittany Cole, the CEO and founder of Career Thrivers. We're a leadership development firm, and we specialize in working with organizations to retain and advance women and professionals of color. So we have an incredible program called Rise and Thrive, Advancing Women Leaders. And it kicks off with a 3-day intensive event, and then it moves into a membership for women leaders. And so Bridgestone is a phenomenal organization that we get to work with. And there are several Bridgestone ladies that are here. Just put a BSAM in the chat so we can shout you out if you are a teammate over at Bridgestone Americas. So they are joining us as a part of their membership with Career Thrivers for our Advancing Women Leaders program. And we provide coaching, we do coaching sessions, and also provide other tools and resources to help women thrive in the work that you're doing. So I see some of you all. Nita says, focused and determined. Always good to see you, Miss Wilson. Catherine is joining us. Catherine is feeling productive and energetic. I love that. Ruby, tired and ready, calm and curious, stressed and frustrated, tired and ready. I love it. I love it. I love it. So thank y'all so much for sharing. I am feeling right now, I'm feeling a sense of calm. And I'm also still feeling very expectant. That was my word yesterday. I'm like, I was thinking in my head just now, like, Brittany, think of a new word. But I am so expectant about what the rest of this month will bring. As wild as that sounds, like there are only a few days in this month, but sometimes all you need is one yes, one opportunity, one shift to completely transform your experience. So I'm expectant for that by the end of this week. And I'm also expecting about Q4. So I'll share with you because I know these are women that are joining us, especially today, and allies. And so I would encourage you, if there's a woman that you work with that may not be joining, if you're joining live, share this live with someone. You can share it right now directly from LinkedIn. Right, invite someone to join the conversation or tag them in the comments so they can come back and join. But I am ideating around, and I just feel led to share this. So this was not a part of the plan for today. So I'm a little off script right now. I'm probably gonna get the side eye from my director of operations, but transparency is a value of mine. It's a value of ours at Career Thrivers as well. So I say that to say, one of the things that we are by the end of next week making a decision on is planning a retreat for women leaders. It's not a conference, it's not a summit, it is a retreat, because there has been this consistent thread, I would probably say really since like July, that we've been noticing in our work with our corporate client partners of women leaders from the executive level. I'm talking like C-suite leaders that we meet with, to emerging leaders, either first-time people leaders or aspiring people leaders or leaders of large projects, all the way really down to entry level. There's this sense of stress and burnout and fatigue. So we are working with some of our corporate partners for potential sponsorship, but also looking at locations to see if something like that will be feasible. So I just want you to put a yes in the chat. Like if that interests you, just drop a yes or a Y in the comments, just to kind of signal to us that, yeah, maybe perhaps Brittany, this is something that I might be interested in. And I look forward to sharing more about that with you. It would be in December. So it's very much a end of the year. There'll be an element of accommodating the year kind of reflection portion of it, as well as a looking forward, right, into 2024, and really charting a pathway for you to thrive in your career, right? So I love it. I love it. I see the yeses coming in. Good to see you. I love it. Jennifer's here. Be Sam proud. Makia's here. I love it. I love it. So glad to see Bridgestone joining us live. And of course, teammates, Bridgestone teammates especially. We'll do a quick inside of the platform. We'll do a quick live after this for any questions that you all have, but definitely feel free to drop any questions that you have into the comments. I see, yes, would it be out of state? That is a great question. So we are looking at both in-state locations that are more of like a retreat vibe, and we all are also looking for some out-of-state locations as well. I would love something by the water, but we'll see. Okay. I see. Yes, that is an awesome idea. Okay. So y'all are tracking with me. Okay. All right. So I know I'm a little off topic there, but I had to ask all that question because I'm feeling it, and you all are probably feeling it as well. So let me know in the comments, when you hear the word burnout, let me ask this question first. On a scale of from 1 to 5, 1 being I'm not connected to burnout at all, I don't feel any burnout at all, to 5 being like, yes, Brittany, I am burnt out. How would you rate kind of how you're feeling right now holistically, right? So this is in the context of your life and career. And I say that because you'll see behind me, oh, wrong side, right here, this little knot right there, that wasn't just like a cute thing to put on my bookshelf, although it is cute. But that chain I often use in coaching as a visual representation of the interconnectedness of our personal and professional lives, right? So one of the first things that I would say to us, and I have some things to share with us, some visuals, and I'll share my screen in just a second. But one thing that I think is important, a foundational perspective or paradigm shift that we have to grasp, is that we really don't live compartmentalized lives, right? Many of you know my story. If you've read my book, Thrive Through It, or if you've heard me talk or give a keynote, I talk a lot about this idea of career grief, right? And for me, noticing it after spending so formerly, before starting Career Thrivers, spent 12 years in corporate, just about 12 years in corporate at a pharmaceutical organization, so in the healthcare industry. And I can remember a time where I spent the first 9 years in sales. I transitioned over into marketing, and my mom had passed. My mom died unexpectedly about 3 months after I got that promotion. And the feelings of grief that was connected to her death, but also the very real perspective shifting and priority setting, like reprioritization of what mattered to me after that, right? And so I often share with women leaders that one of the benefits, like the beauty in change, challenge, loss, and even burnout, the beauty in disruption like that is it helps us to see and understand what really matters to us. Like, we get really crystal clear on, is this something that I want, or am I pursuing something that someone else wants for me? Right? The other thing that those moments do is it shines a light on the fact that we don't live a personal life and a professional life, right? And so sometimes we try to live those kinds of compartmentalized lives. And what disruption and change and challenge and loss and grief have taught me is that our lives look much more like that knot up there, right? It's this interconnectedness that is inextricably linked. So then that also means whatever is happening in our quote unquote personal life is directly connected to how we show up in the workplace, and whatever is happening in our career, right? In our place of work, at our employer, even if you're an entrepreneur, right? Whatever is happening in your career has a direct impact on how you show up in your life, right? Personally. And so I think that's just important for us to not only remember, but to hold kind of at the front of our minds, right? So I see some of you in the comments. I see 4s and 5s, right? So if you have another answer, and this is a brave space, so feel free to share. But and I'm resonating right there with you. On a scale from 1 to 5, if you had to rate your level of burnout, I hear you all saying, hey, Brittany, it's feeling pretty high, right? It's feeling pretty high right now. So if that's you, you were in the right place. And we're going to talk today quite candidly about how do you shift from burnout to brilliance? How do you take where you are today, even if you say like, yes, Brittany, I'm at a 4 or a 5, and really start to create boundaries, right, that are going to help you thrive. So I hope that you all can see my screen. I'm sharing my screen with you, and I'm not sure if you can still see me. I only have a few slides, but hopefully you can still see me and hear me. Just put a 1 in the comments just to let me know that things are good. You can hear me and you can see what I'm sharing with you on the screen here. Just drop a 1 into the comments just so that I can make sure we are all set. Okay. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay, so good to see you. I see Charlie joining us. Thank you so much from Rochester. So good to see you. Renika, thank you for that. So, women leaders, especially, and again, kind of think about your career dynamic, your structure, like how you're showing up in terms of your career right now. We can often be more prone and vulnerable to burnout because of external and systemic inequalities, right? And there's a ton of research. I often will reference Lean In and McKinsey, their Women in the Workplace study that they've done, I believe, for the past 8 years now. I believe this year will make 8 for them. And there's a ton of data around how women experience, particularly corporate, and how women leaders are really taking the brunt of the stress, the burnout in the work that they're doing. So this conversation won't focus in on that from a DEI lens. I know for many of you that we work with, Bridgestone included. Bridgestone is an organization where we actually helped to build the DEI strategy for Bridgestone Americas. But today's conversation won't be from that angle, right? I want to help the actual women that are on. And if you're an organizational leader, there's some things that you can pull out as well. We can certainly talk about ways that Career Thrivers can be a partner with you to help women at your organization thrive, right? But this is really about, for you as a woman or as an ally of women, how can you set boundaries to thrive in your life and career? So one, we've got to understand burnout. And let me just say up front, and I see it as a benefit. You all know, right? I worked at Pfizer, but I'm not a healthcare professional. So, right. So let me just say that up front. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist, right? I'm not coming to this topic from a medical perspective. And while that is beneficial, I believe that has its place. We have therapists that we work with at Career Thrivers that we bring into our coaching programs, because coaching and therapy are not the same thing. I'll say that again. Coaching and therapy are not the same thing. There sometimes comes a time with our coaching engagements where we will recommend therapy for a coachee, right, as an additional add-on to their personal and professional development. But I do bring my experience as a leader, right, to this topic. And so that's the perspective that I'm coming from. So I hope that you hear in this conversation that I am in this like you. I've been where you've been, not as a healthcare provider, but as an emerging and an executive level leader. Okay. And so that's the perspective that I'll be sharing this from. So when we think about burnout, it's this constant state of stress, right? And it can sometimes show up in our bodies, right? Where we are like physically stressed, whether it starts to impact our sleep or starts to impact how we feel energetically in our body. And it also can cause mental exhaustion, right? So we can fall into this state of feeling mentally like we're always tired, even if we've had a lot of sleep, right? Just put a 2 into the comments if you can relate to that. It's like, okay, I slept the solid recommended 8 hours, right? And maybe over the weekend, you're like, okay, I slept in and I'm still waking up exhausted. If you've ever been there, maybe you're not there now, but if you've ever felt like that, just put a 2 into the comments, right? I certainly would put a 2 in the comments with you, because I can resonate with moments where I felt like that. Where like, this is beyond sleep, right? This isn't about being tired, right? Or not getting enough rest, right? So all of those can be symptoms of burnout. And if you have other symptoms that you've noticed, right, especially as a woman leader, let us know in the comments, what would you add to that list that are potential symptoms of burnout? Other symptoms that show up sometimes are cynicism, where you're like, I'm usually an optimistic person. I'm upbeat. I see the glass as, it's half full, right? You may have that perspective, but you may start to notice that you feel maybe just a bit neutral on things, or have cynicism around things, or feel detached, right? Sometimes those can be signs of burnout, right? Again, we talked about this, lack of sleep, right? Lack of energy. It's like, I don't have the energy for this. And again, when we think about as women leaders, we sometimes find ourselves in this tension of, especially in the corporate sense, where we are the only or one of a few on a team or in a department. right? Put a 3 in the comments if you can resonate with that. You're like, yep, I'm either currently there or I've been there where I am representing for the women in this context, right? And that can add its own layer of, I'll just call it mental fortitude, right? That you have to be attentive to the fact that not only am I a leader in this space, but I'm the only woman in this space. And sometimes I'm experiencing certain pressure or certain expectations that require more of me, right? In the DEI space, we would call that having an emotional tax, right? So when there are aspects of how you show up or how you need to show up that impact your mental and emotional well-being that other groups don't experience, right? It is an example of an emotional tax, right? An extra thing that you have to worry about, that you have to think about. So boundaries become really important. And this is something, you all, that I'll share, candidly, is always at the front of my mind. And I think it's important that for all of us, even if you say, I'm pretty good at setting boundaries, I believe in setting boundaries. I have come to learn that every season of life will require a shifting of boundaries. And I just wanted us to let that settle just for a second. That every season of life that I'm in will require a shifting of boundaries. So first of all, what are boundaries even? All right. So I think of them as guidelines that really define how you interact with others and how you expect to be treated, right? So what is acceptable in the relationship? And again, right, depending on the season of your life that you're in, this might shift, right? There might be seasons of your life, and it doesn't have to be, right, major things, right? You might think of, partnership, getting married, having children, becoming a caregiver in some way, right? Those are large shifts in your life. But even things like in Q4, I have a deadline for a project that I've been working on all year, right? So this quarter might mean that you need to, because it's a certain season when you've got a big deliverable, you've got a big project that's coming up, you're putting in more hours at work, right? It might mean that you need to shift your boundaries in your relationships. And so when we think about boundary setting in the workplace, I will say again, and I'm going to flow in and out of this DEI hat, because we believe at Career Thrivers that diversity, equity, and inclusion is a core competency of leadership development. So we don't necessarily see it as an attachment. We see it as an intrinsic part of how good leaders shift to great leaders, right? If you've read the book Good to Great, then you know about the flywheel and all of the things that are talked about in business to really get to growth and scale. But when it comes to leadership, right, one of the flywheels of leadership is understanding and operating from a constant state of inclusive leadership, right? It's one of the things that makes you become a better leader. So one thing that impacts boundary setting in the workplace is generational diversity. So the differences across generations, and any people leader is probably nodding their head right now and saying, yep, there are definitely differences, right? My Gen Z direct reports, teammates, colleagues have a slightly different expectation, right, about their interaction and the way that they set boundaries and the way that they expect to be interacted with than, say, our baby boomers, right? And we do a whole workshop and curriculum around generational diversity, because for people leaders, it's important to understand the impact of technology, if that's really what it is at its core, the impact of technology on the experience and expectations of different generations in a professional environment, right? And there are a lot of other tentacles there, but I did want to add that in, that when we talk about boundary setting in the workplace, it involves defining what is acceptable. But as a people leader, you have to understand that what is acceptable generationally, oftentimes by one group, might be very different from another group, right? And even within the same generation, if you look at it from an intersectional lens, whether it's by gender, by race, by tenure, right? What's acceptable behavior by one group may be different. So it's important then, right, as a leader, and this is something that I would say is a takeaway, if you are a people leader currently, or if you are aspiring to become a people leader, having clear and consistent communication around boundaries in the workplace is a critical success factor for building a great culture on your team. Because again, we just talked about those seasons and boundaries, they shift and they change, right? So it's important then as the leader, right, as a leader, that you're having that conversation. And then last but not least, right, we know the benefits. So when we think about for women and as allies of women, right, setting boundaries can help to prevent the burnout, the overload, and even create more clarity in the work that you're doing to reduce stress and improve your overall life, right? So when you think about boundaries, let me know in the comments, what are some boundaries that you have set in your career, right? Or what are some boundaries that you would like to set? Let me know in the comment section here. I see Michelle says, I agree. I had a huge boundary shift when I was a caregiver for my mom. Yes. Yes, Michelle, that's a big one, right? So that's a season of life where your personal life requires more of you. And there's a mentor of mine that I admire so much. She's a Fortune CEO, and I'll share a takeaway from her in just a second about building your diversified portfolio. So just hold on to that. And if by chance I forget, just type in the comments diversified portfolio. It'll help me remember, right? To share something that I believe was a game changer for me in understanding this idea of work-life synergy, right? So what is a boundary that you have created in your career that has helped you, right, to reduce stress, improve your overall health, but also to thrive, to be able to show up authentically and to be able to operate at the highest level of not only performance, but also productivity and efficiency in the work that you're doing, right? So here's some strategies for setting boundaries as you are sharing with me some of the boundaries that you have. The first thing that you need to do to set boundaries, right, is to define your values and your limits. Type into the comments if you can, if you're somewhere where you can just type visa into the comments. VISA. Type the word visa, VISA, into the comments, visa, right? And I'll share what that means in just a second. Some of you already know, right? So I want you to reflect on your values and really think about prioritizing what is important to you. Like, what do you need in order to thrive right now? And that's a great like journaling or introspection question. So if someone would type that into the comments for me, right, for all of us to think about, what do you need right now to thrive in your career? Okay. Again, this is you do right. When Ayala Van Zandt says, do the work, I miss her show. I remember when she says, do the work, I can hear a voice in my head, right? This is part of that work, right? It's you defining for yourself based on, again, like we talked about, your current season, right? Reflecting on, what do you need right now to thrive? And it might look different. We're heading into Q4 of a year. I don't know about your year. My year has been jam-packed with a lot of change and transition. I'm like, Lord, I'm on a constant roller coaster over here. And can we just mellow out just a little bit? Just a tad, right? So what I need in Q4 looks different than what I needed in Q1, right? And the same might be true for you. So as you think about your current state right now, what do you need that's different? So I see some of you typed Visa into the comments. And so Visa stands for your values, your interests, your skills, and your abilities. And Visa is a core framework that we use at Career Thrivers, a borrowed framework from my Inroads days. So that's how long Visa has been with me. But I believe it's a great personal leadership framework for you to identify and start to set better boundaries, right? Especially that values, right? And not your company's values, right? Not what's on your company's website. What are your personal non-negotiables? What are your personal values? I often share when we're teaching about values, the book Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. She has a phenomenal activity in the book that helps you to determine what your personal values are. And then what are you naturally curious about? That's your interest. Your skills are, what are those things that you've learned to do very well? You do them with confidence, and your abilities are the things that you do naturally well. So think of your abilities as your strengths or your gifts. All right. So the second way to set boundaries is to communicate clearly and assertively. Women, leaders, ladies. Okay. This is something that, especially, and I believe there's like a geographical dynamic to this as well. I'm from Nashville, was born and raised in Nashville. And so there's a Southern hospitality. And I know that we have other states that are joining us. But one thing that living in New York taught me, it taught me a lot of things. Oh my gosh. My time living and working in New York as a digital marketer at Pfizer was probably one of the most transformational seasons of my life and career. Not probably, was for sure, hands down. And one of the many things that I learned about New Yorkers is, one, they're really not rude. They're just assertive and clear, right? So whereas in the South, right, and this is my opinion here, so nothing factual or no references for this, but just based on my experience, right? In the South, we say things like, we prioritize Southern charm, right? So oftentimes we will say things that are misaligned with what we actually think. Like, oh, bless her heart, right? Or, oh, right, a nicety. But in New York, and I don't perceive it as being rude, I just think it's honest, right? And assertive and clear. Most New Yorkers are going to tell you exactly what they think, right? And how they feel, right? And so let's take a page from our fellow New Yorkers, right? And those of us who are just wired that way, to make our needs and expectations clear, right? In a firm and respectful manner. So you can be tactful, right? You can use I statements to say things like, to have a conversation with your leader to say, this quarter, I'm really prioritizing XYZ, right? Insert project or insert capability or insert whatever your priorities are. So please, expect that I'm going to ABC, right? Or a way, and here's really great language for women to use with your leader, whether you have a woman leader or a male leader, regardless, with your leader, is to use language that reflects the way that your leader can support you, right? So I'll give an example, because I know when it comes to teaching, scenarios really help. So you can use that same language. We're heading into Q4, or maybe you have a one-on-one with your leader next week. We're kicking off Q4, and I'm really prioritizing XYZ. What are your thoughts on these priorities? Are you aligned with me focusing on these 3 areas for this quarter? Right? Then you get their feedback. And then you say, here are 2 ways that you can support me in focusing on these 3 areas. Now, if you want to take your one-on-one meeting to the next level and not just shoot the breeze and talk about the weather, right? Anchor your conversations in how your leader, your people leader, can better support you, right? Or just how they can support you, and speak in the language of priorities. That's going to help you to set boundaries without feeling like I'm like, letting them know, what I need or want, even though there's nothing wrong with that, right? So I just wanted to share that for those of you that might be more, Southern charm, or maybe feel a little, maybe even anxiousness around, having a boundary conversation with your leader. That is a way that you can do it without feeling like you're being confrontational, right? Or without feeling like, you're being accusatory, right? So just saying, hey, these are the areas that I'm going to prioritize. Are you aligned with these 3 priorities? And then here are some ways that you can support me in getting these things done, right? That part is on you. And I say this often when ever we're speaking or teaching, or even when we are doing instructional design for companies. Your career is yours, right? So it's on you to own your career development, to own the experience that you want to have, but also to take responsibility for the experience that you're having, right? So if you put a 5 or a 4 in the chat and you're thinking like, hey, things are really wild right now, like there's a lot going on, the business is doubling down because of, economic marketplace dynamics, whatever the case might be, right? All of that might be true, but you still within that, right, have the ability to own your power and set boundaries, right, in these ways. So 1, we're going to define our values and limits. We're going to communicate clearly and assertively. Thirdly, we're going to set realistic expectations, right? So be realistic. What is it that you actually can do in Q4? And let's just make this, you all, I know this content lives on and on forever. So someone might be seeing this in Q2 of 2024. So just apply the quarter that fits for where you are right now. But for those of us who are watching this live or are tuning in as we approach Q4 of 2023, let's focus in on these next 3 months, right? For Q4 of 2023, and I'm going to ask you this question. Feel free to let me know in the comments, right? Let us know. How are you going to set realistic expectations about what you need in Q4? Does that mean you need to have a set conversation with your leader, specifically around expectations and priorities? Does that mean you need to have a meeting with a team member or someone, a partner that you do work with, right? That's on your team. Does that mean that you need to have a conversation with your spouse or your partner, right? Or your children? When you think about this quarter coming up, Q4 of 2023, or the next quarter for you, and how you want to experience your career, what it would look like for you to be thriving in your career, what expectations do you need to set, right? So don't overcommit, delegate tasks, and learn to say no. And this is a big one for women because sometimes we can fall into what is called a fixed mindset, where we are not thinking abundantly. We're thinking from a mindset of scarcity, right? And so we feel like because there's not a lot of opportunity, or because there's not insert scarcity thought, right, that I need to say yes to everything. And certainly there are seasons of life, right? I'm thinking about Shonda Rhimes' book right now in my head, right? Year of Yes, phenomenal book. Phenomenal book. And she talked about in the book, a season in her life where she needed to say yes, where she needed to be open to new things and new possibilities and to take the limits off of herself. But if you're in a season where you're like, Brittany, I'm at a 4 or a 5, when it comes to burnout, and I'm in a season of change, or things might be shifting, or I might be noticing that I have different priorities, that I may want something different, it might be a really good time for you to reassess your expectations and then communicate them to other people, right? As we wrap up here, support systems for women leaders are important. So I shared with you about our support system at Career Thrivers. It's called Rise and Thrive Advancing Women Leaders. And I'm so excited about where we're taking that in 2024. So stay tuned for how you can connect with our support system, but also look for support systems in your community, inside of your organization. Resource groups and organizations. Most corporations have a colleague resource group, right? I know like at Bridgestone, they have BWIN, right? So that's their Bridgestone Women's ERG or CRG, right? If you work at a corporate organization that has affinity groups, tap in there, right? But also look at industry related organizations and groups. When I worked at Pfizer, I was a member of HBA. Yeah, was it HBA? HBA. So it's the Healthcare Business Alliance, but it was a business alliance for women, right? They had an ally portion as well for men, but it was curated and created for women. And I was a member of that organization. So tap into resources that are within your industry that can help you to thrive as a woman leader. And then be open to peer groups, right? That's one of the things that I love about our membership model with Rise and Thrive, is that we have coaching, right? We have different coaching containers based on the budgets and the needs of the organizations that we work with. But we go all the way from offering one-on-one coaching to providing small coaching groups, right, for women leaders, so that you have a coach that is knowledgeable, that can be a mirror for you to help you see around the corner and make some of those tough decisions. All right. So I'm just going to share one case study with you. I mentioned diversified portfolio, and I'll never forget, I'm sitting in a jam-packed room at a hotel in downtown Nashville. And it was an executive luncheon that our Nashville chamber puts on. So, and I can remember, like, I was invited to this luncheon, but I honestly did not know who was speaking. So I remember walking into the room and I'm like, wow, there are a lot of people at this luncheon. I was invited to attend. So I walk up to the front, I sit down with some employees of the chamber. And I remember seeing the picture of the woman that was going to be speaking, and I remember reading her title, but I didn't know her. Like I hadn't followed her work. I didn't know really who she was. I didn't really know her story. So I come into the space, and the event kicks off, the food comes, and we're eating and networking, mixing and mingling. And the moderator comes back up and she's like, okay, it's now time to introduce the speaker. So she introduces someone who I think of as a mentor now, who is one of like top 5 most incredible women that inspire me, to Shonda Brown Duckett. And she's the CEO of TIAA today. At that time, she was the CEO of Chase Consumer Bank. And from the time she opened her mouth, y'all, to the time she finished, I was just captivated. Like from her, and this is real. It's why in a former life I did image consulting, but your first impression matters, right? So from the time she walks up onto the stage with these beautiful box braids, and I'm thinking in my head, like, she has box braids, right? Because I don't know about you, but I grew up in a time in corporate America where if you as a Black woman had box braids for the weekend or for the holiday, for vacation or whatever, on Monday morning, when it's time to come back to work, you got to figure out something else with your hair. Like you got to figure out something else, because braids weren't seen as a professional hairstyle, right? And now, thanks to the Crown Act and so many incredible women who have shifted that, right? To know that, hey, the way that hair grows out of your head, right, regardless of your race or ethnicity, it's professional, right? Or the way that you choose to wear your hair is professional. A lot has changed. But I remember from the time she walked on stage with these box braids, I'm like, okay, wow, you got my attention. And just the stories she told, the authenticity with which she tackled really hard topics about showing up as a woman in a corporate environment, and for her intersection, showing up as a Black woman, as a woman of color, as a woman in a male dominated industry. It was such a inspiring, insightful, heart grasping conversation. But there's one thing that she said during that particular keynote and fireside chat that has stuck with me to this day. And that was probably what had to be before the pandemic, because it was a larger group of people. It's been a while ago. It was probably 2019. And there's one thing that she shared that I'll always remember. So she talked about how our lives, right, or how we as women really need to learn to, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, but we really need to learn to live our lives like a diversified portfolio, right? So if you've worked with a financial advisor, a financial planner, right, you typically are not advised to put all of your assets into one investment, right? But you diversify your investment. And so she talked about how all of us, in terms of our lives, we only have 100%, right? We have a pie of 100%. That's it. So when we say things like, oh, I'm showing up 100% to work, or I'm showing up, 100%, with my children, or, being a caregiver, or even being a wife or a spouse or a partner, that's not really an accurate representation of what's happening, because you only have 100%. So she talked about how much like the markets fluctuate, so your assets or your investments would fluctuate in terms of where you would put your assets based on the market dynamics. The same is true for our life. Based on the market dynamics, or based on the seasons, what's happening in our life, whether we are a new caregiver, or whether we just had a baby, or whether our baby is now a high schooler and playing sports and doing different things, or whether we just moved into a new role, or whether we're a master at the role that we're in, right? Different marketplace dynamics or different seasons of our life will require us to diversify our investments inside of our portfolio. But we have to remember, especially as women leaders, our portfolio is only 100%, right? So if you look at your 100%, and you don't have to do this in the comments, but if you want to, feel free, right? What would your percentages be, right? If you list out your priorities, the things that are important to you, where you are investing your time, right? And just as a quick aside, right? Our list of priorities is not just the things that in our head and heart matter, right? But your priorities are a reflection of where you spend your time and where you spend your money, right? So my pastor always says, like, what's important to you, or your priorities, if you look at your calendar and if you look at your bank statements, right? It'll like quickly tell you. You don't have to think long, right? But it'll quickly tell you. You surely won't think wrong, because it'll tell you, hey, these are the things that I prioritize, because I spend my most valuable assets there, my time and my money, right? So for you though, just simplistically, if you think about like work and, partnership and parenting, what percentages based on your portfolio would you give those areas, right? So I hope that from our conversation today, that you understand one, that leadership is a privilege, but it's also a challenge, right? It can be challenging, especially for women, where we face unique barriers, unique challenges to show up fully and to advance as leaders, right? To step into those, manager, senior director, VP, managing director, right? To move up in our organizations. But the solution to those challenges is for us to set better boundaries, right? To have an effective strategy, to be intentional about how we can thrive as leaders. And by thriving as leaders, it means thriving personally and professionally so that we prevent burnout, so that we improve our health, so that we can maintain a sense of control over our lives, and so that we can truly thrive. All right. So I love what some of you all have shared in the comments, and let me know how this resonated with you or if you have any questions. So as we wrap up this leadership lab session, I hope this was helpful for you. I want to answer any questions that you have and then acknowledge your comments here. So Miss Wilson says, I focus on living in harmony when intersecting work and life. I love that. That also, that felt like an affirmation for me. So I love that. Take what you need here, right? If you're joining us. So I focus on living in harmony with work, or when intersecting work and home. Michelle says, I have different boundaries at this time when interviewing for positions I'm passionate about and not wasting time on interviewing for positions I'm not passionate about, open to an HR career opportunity that aligns with my purpose and values. That is such fantastic emotional intelligence and self-awareness, Michelle. And I think that so many women, especially who are in the job search process, and really anyone, can learn from that, right? That we can sometimes get in a cycle of almost desperation and say, hey, I'm going to, apply for every single role. I'm going to throw my name in the hat for everything, versus taking a more intentional approach that helps you to manage your mental and emotional well-being. So I love that. I love that. Communicating what will help to contribute to my success. And that's a big one. We talked about that, right? That was step number 2 in how you can set better boundaries, is communicating those, right? Ruby says, setting boundaries by having honest conversations and believing to be honest with myself. This includes telling people no and being assertive when it comes to work and life. Absolutely, Ruby. That is, like, hands down, one of the top ways to, decrease that sense of burnout and eliminate it, hopefully, and set better boundaries. I love it. I love it. Jennifer, thank you for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you joining us as well. Thank you so much for being here. All right, y'all. So these are slated for 45 minutes. And so we are just above that. But again, thank you all so much for being here. If you have questions, drop them into the comment section. And I invite you to join me on Tuesdays, where you can truly just listen in, or you can find our podcast on YouTube. But wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure you check out the Career Thrivers podcast. I'm going to be dropping a bonus segment, and there are several new episodes that we've dropped on everything from, I think one of my favorites right now is getting out of my head and into my habits. So how do you create better habits? That's also connected to setting better boundaries and not getting burnt out, but taking a look at your habits and doing that. I talk about Atomic Habits, which is a book that I read that has been a game changer for me in terms of habit forming. But also I'm going to be dropping a bonus section on the Own Your Power checklist, which is a resource that's taken me more time than I would have liked to bring together. But I wanted to make sure that I went through all of our curriculum at Career Thrivers, and we have 5 primary curriculum focus areas, and then within that we have several different, like, workshops and tons of content. But I wanted to go through that and really put together for you a concise packet, like a workbook. It's almost like an ebook on how you, especially as a woman leader, can own your power. Because a lot of what we're talking about when it comes to burnout and boundaries has to do with your mindset and how you think about the agency that you have, right? The agency that you have to really create and to decide on the career that would be most suitable for you. So I hope this was helpful for you. I do see one question here. Am I able to share the slides? So yes, I can. I'll have to think creatively about how I can do that. I think I'll just make a post. I'll make like a carousel PDF on LinkedIn, and then you all can access the slides that way. So yes, we'll be happy to share those with you. All right. So we will see you very soon. Make sure again you subscribe to the Career Thrivers podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are in the midst of a career change or shift right now, check out my course on LinkedIn Learning. I have a LinkedIn Learning course called Thriving Through Career Challenges. If someone would type that into the comments for me, it's called Thriving Through Career Challenges, and it will walk you through a very practical approach to navigating disruption, change, and loss in your life and career. Right? How do you talk about it? How do you own your story within it? How do you figure out what's next when you have no idea which way you're going to go? So if you're in the midst of a change like that, or planning or wanting some type of transition in your career, it's a great course to check out. All right. Until next time, let's thrive together. I'll see y'all very soon. Take care. Bye now.